Have you ever found yourself sitting in a classroom or maybe like one of those corporate team building seminars and the instructor hands you that famous read everything first test?
Oh, I mean, everyone knows that one.
Right. You know the exact one I'm talking about. It's this worksheet with like 20 numbered instructions and they just rapidly escalate in absurdity.
Yeah, they get ridiculous really fast.
Exactly. Like instruction number 3 says to draw 3 small circles in the margin. And then by instruction number 7, it's telling you to stand up and say your name aloud.
Which is, it's just a classic exercise in human error, really.
It totally is. But the trick, the trap that gets almost everyone is instruction number 1. It clearly states, read all instructions before doing anything.
And people just breeze right past it.
Oh, completely. And then sitting quietly down at the very bottom of the page, the final instruction reads, now that you have read all the instructions, complete only items 1 and 2.
And, well, chaos ensues.
Absolute chaos. Highly educated, completely literate adults inevitably end up standing up and shouting their names in a room full of strangers.
It's hilarious, but also kind of terrifying.
Yeah, and here's what is so fascinating about that it is not an intelligence test. Like, if you failed that test, you didn't fail an IQ check. You experienced a very specific, deeply human cognitive failure mode.
A failure mode that, researchers and particularly standardized test makers take incredibly seriously.
So today, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the surprisingly complex science of following written directions. We are pulling from a stack of sources that focus heavily on nursing entrance exams, specifically the TEAS and the HESI.
Right, because in the medical field, this exact skill isn't just a quirky classroom prank. It's a separately scored metric, and honestly, it's a matter of life and death.
Exactly. I want to push back on an initial assumption right away, though, because I think I've made this exact mistake myself. I always figured that following written directions was just like a low-level version of reading comprehension.
A lot of people think that, yeah. They assume if you can read, you can follow directions.
But it's fundamentally different, isn't it? It's like the difference between reading a recipe, understanding it, and agreeing it sounds delicious versus actually stepping into the kitchen and, executing the meal flawlessly.
That is a really crucial distinction. Understanding the concept doesn't mean you can actually execute the build.
Right.
Cognitive psychologists working with procedural texts have realized over the last several decades that comprehension and execution are running on 2 completely different tracks in the brain.
Like completely separate.
Completely. You can perfectly understand every single word on a page and still totally fail to carry out the instructions.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this. If these are completely different cognitive muscles, how long did it take us to figure that out? Like, did we just assume for decades that good readers automatically made good direction followers?
For a long time, yeah, we absolutely did. Reading researchers in the early 20th century essentially treated following directions as like the absolute bottom rung of the comprehension ladder.
So they thought it was easy.
Right. They thought it sat far below complex skills like inference or evaluation. But in the real world, employers and schools were noticing a glaring problem.
What kind of problem?
Well, highly literate, intelligent people were constantly failing to execute multi-step written procedures. I mean, they were filling out basic forms wrong, assembling equipment backward, administering incorrect treatments, you name it.
So they understood the vocabulary, but the physical actions just didn't match the text. When did the academic world finally catch on to what was actually happening?
So the origin story of this realization goes back over a century. Now, there's no single inventor of the concept. There's no, B.F. Skinner of following directions. But the founding document is generally considered to be a 1917 paper.
1917?
Yeah, it was by Edward L. Thorndike, and it was called Reading as Reasoning.
We've known about this cognitive gap since World War I. How did Thorndike actually prove it back then?
He ran this really fascinating study using school children. He gave them short paragraphs containing multi-step instructions and simple reasoning problems.
Okay.
And then he didn't just look at whether they got the answer right or wrong. He watched exactly where their execution broke down. And his finding completely overturned the conventional wisdom of the time.
What did he find?
He discovered that the children, and he argued many adults do this too, were treating reading as passive word recognition rather than active step-by-step reasoning.
I'm not sure I follow. What does passive word recognition actually look like in practice? Were they just skimming the text?
Not skimming at all, actually. They would read every single word correctly, like they could pronounce every sentence perfectly aloud,
Right.
but then they would act on only a tiny fragment of what was actually instructed. Often their brains would just lock onto the very first recognizable noun or verb they saw.
Oh, he's...
Yeah, and they would immediately initiate an action based on that one familiar word, completely ignoring the sequential logic or the conditions attached to it.
Oh, wow. So if an instruction said, like, before you draw the circle, fold the paper, they just saw the word circle, grabbed a pencil, and started drawing.
You're hitting on the core problem right there. The failure to execute isn't a failure to understand the definition of the words. It's a failure to map those words into a sequential action plan.
That sheds so much light on why nursing exams score this separately. Like, on a test like the TEAS, a standard reading comprehension question asks, what did the author mean? But a direction-following question asks, what precisely am I now required to do?
Exactly. And that is why you can be, brilliant at literary analysis and still bomb a procedural test.
Because it's a different goal entirely.
Right. Think about how we are taught to read in school. We're constantly taught inferential comprehension, so reading between the lines, guessing the author's intent, finding the hidden theme.
Yeah, finding the symbolism and all that.
Exactly. But procedural text demands the exact opposite. It demands absolutely zero inferential wiggle room.
Zero wiggle room.
I like that.
Yeah, you aren't supposed to guess what the manual implies. You are supposed to execute the literal steps.
Okay, so if the brain is naturally prone to just grabbing a familiar word and running with it, what is actually breaking down under the hood? Our sources talk about this fragile chain of events in the brain required to actually execute a task.
Yeah, so researchers have identified 4 distinct sequential cognitive operations that must happen to follow written directions.
4 steps.
4 steps. And the terrifying part is, if you fail at any single one of these 4 steps, the entire execution collapses.
Okay, let's break those down for everyone. What is the very first thing our brains have to do?
The first pillar is parsing structure. Your brain has to consciously recognize that the text it's looking at is procedural.
So, like noticing the format.
Exactly. It has to look for visual and linguistic signals. So numbered lists, imperative verbs like insert, verify, or discard.
It also looks for sequence markers like first, then, before, or except. If you don't parse the text as a procedure, your brain never switches out of that passive reading for information mode and into active execution mode.
So you had to realize you're actually on the hook to do something.
Yeah.
Okay, assuming I crossed that hurdle, what's step 2?
Pillar number 2 is working memory. You have to hold the sequence in your mental workspace while your hands actually perform the task.
Oh man, that seems incredibly vulnerable to overload. Especially if a step contains a condition, right? Like if manual says do X unless Y, or I don't know, do X, but only for patients under 12.
Yeah.
How does working memory handle those qualifiers?
It handles them very poorly, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, working memory is like the RAM in a computer, but it's incredibly volatile. It can only hold a few items at a time before it starts dropping information.
Just deleting steps.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Which leads directly into the third cognitive operation, and this is where the vast majority of errors occur. Suppressing default assumptions.
Oh. Okay, this is the one I really want to dig into. Suppressing the urge to substitute what you expect the instruction to say for what it actually says.
It happens all the time.
Why do we constantly overwrite the actual instructions of what we think they should say? Are our brains just inherently lazy?
It's actually the opposite of laziness, interestingly enough. It's an extreme form of efficiency.
Efficiency, how?
Well, the human brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. Because working memory degrades so rapidly, your brain naturally tries to compress the data to save cognitive bandwidth.
So it's trying to help us out.
Right. It fills in the gaps with past experiences. So if an instruction violates your expectations, say, a recipe tells you to add the eggs after the flour, but you always do it before your degrading memory will literally rewrite the text in your head to match your assumption.
That is wild. My brain actively edits the document to make the cognitive load lighter.
It does. And this reveals a major flaw in how we evaluate manuals. We often use tools like the Flesch-Kincaid formula to measure text readability, right?
Right. Checking if the sentences are short and simple.
Exactly. A manual might score as highly readable because the vocabulary is simple. But that tells you absolutely nothing about whether the information is sequenced in a way that the brain can easily hold in working memory without corrupting it.
That makes so much sense. And I can see how that demands the fourth and final pillar, verifying execution against the original text.
Yes, the crucial last step.
You physically have to look back at the paper, not your memory of the paper. Because based on what you just explained, my memory of the instruction is probably already a corrupted, compressed version of the truth.
Exactly. The verification step is the ultimate safeguard. You act, and then you check the paper to confirm. But ironically, it's the step people skip the most, especially as they become more experienced.
Okay, I want to explore that paradox of experience, because this is where the stakes jump from like ruined cake recipes to actual life and death. If I'm a novice, I'm probably staring intently at the manual.
Because you don't know what you're doing.
Right. But what happens when highly trained experts start relying on their compressed memory instead of that fourth pillar of verification?
You end up with some of the most catastrophic, well-documented failures in modern history. The tragedy of the Boeing Model 299 in 1935 perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, let's set the scene for that because it is a stunning story.
Right.
So the U.S. Army Air Corps is running a flight competition at Wright Field in Ohio.
Right.
Boeing brings out this massive gleaming prototype, the Model 299, which is the precursor to the legendary B-17 bomber.
A huge, complex machine.
Yeah, and the man in the cockpit is Major Ployer P. Hill.
Yeah.
And he is not some rookie who doesn't know how to read an instrument panel. He is one of the most elite, experienced test pilots in the country.
An absolute master of his craft.
But the aircraft crashes almost immediately on takeoff, and Major Hill is killed. And the investigation found no mechanical failure.
None at all.
The cause was that he simply forgot to release a locking mechanism on the elevator controls. It was a brand new feature on this highly complex aircraft that older, simpler planes just didn't have.
And we have to ask why a master pilot forgot a basic step. It goes directly back to Pillar 3, default assumptions.
Because he was so used to flying the older planes.
Exactly. Major Hill's vast expertise with simpler aircraft had built incredibly strong default assumptions in his brain. His mental model told him that checking an elevator lock wasn't part of a takeoff sequence because he had never needed to do it before.
Wow.
So expertise actually builds the very assumptions that make following novel, precise directions so difficult.
So the better you get at your job, the more dangerous you are to yourself if you encounter a new instruction, because your brain is so confident it already knows the sequence. That feels almost insulting to an expert. Did the military blame him for being careless?
They didn't, actually. The reporters at the time literally called it too much airplane for one man to fly.
Too much airplane.
Yeah. But the Army recognized the cognitive bottleneck. They didn't strap the plane, and they didn't simplify the mechanics either. Instead, they formalized a written, step-by-step pre-flight checklist.
The first one.
Right. And every single pilot, no matter how many thousands of hours they had in the air, was required to follow it verbatim, verifying each step before takeoff.
Because the checklist forces that fourth pillar. It forces you to verify against the text, bypassing your corrupted working memory.
Exactly. It's the direct ancestor of the checklists used in commercial aviation today, and it really paved the way for how we handle high-stakes procedures in other fields.
Which brings this whole discussion directly to the healthcare field, and why exams like the TEAS and HESI focus on this so relentlessly.
It's so critical in medicine.
Our sources point to a landmark 1999 report from the Institute of Medicine called To Err is Human. It estimated that tens of thousands of American deaths per year were caused by preventable medical errors, and a staggering number of those were tied to misread or misexecuted written orders.
We are talking about the lethal consequences of missing a conditional clause. Imagine a physician's written order that says, give unless potassium is elevated.
Oh man, if the nurse's working memory compresses that instruction and just drops the word unless, the result is catastrophic.
And notice that these are not comprehension failures in the way Thorndike meant it. The medical staff fully understood what potassium was, they understood the dosage amount, and they understood how to administer it.
So the vocabulary was perfectly understood.
Yes. These were sequencing and verification failures. It is the exact same cognitive failure mode as that read all instructions first classroom trap, just with lethal stakes.
That makes the work of Atul Gawande and the World Health Organization's surgical safety checklist so compelling. In 2008 and 2009, Gawande's team rolled out a simple, one-page written surgical checklist across 8 hospitals globally.
Very simple checklist.
Yeah, and it covered incredibly basic stuff. Confirm the patient's identity, confirm the surgical site, verify antibiotics were administered, count the sponges.
And the crucial context here is that the surgical teams already possessed this knowledge. The checklist wasn't teaching a veteran surgeon how to perform an appendectomy.
No, it just forced them to pause, read it aloud, and confirm each item in sequence before making an incision. And the results are mind-blowing. Major complication rates fell by roughly a third, and death rates were cut in half. Half.
It's incredible.
Just from reading and verifying.
Yeah, nothing about the surgeon's physical dexterity changed. What changed was forcing execution to match the physical text rather than relying on their degrading memory.
Right.
In a clinical setting, all the compassion, general intelligence, and years of experience in the world cannot undo a misexecuted sequence.
Okay, so if we know working memory is volatile, and we know checklists save lives, why is this still such a widespread problem? Like, are researchers united on how to actually fix everyday instructions so people stop failing?
Well, there is zero debate that following directions matters, but the field is heavily fractured into three rival camps, debating the root cause of these failures and consequently how to fix them.
Oh, interesting. Let's walk through those camps. Who makes up the first group?
The first group is the attention camp. Their underlying theory is that failures are simply attentional lapses.
Like, people are just distracted.
Exactly. People are rushing, they're distracted by their phones, or they're just exhausted. Their solution is behavioral. Force people to slow down and read deliberately.
That totally explains why the TEAS and HESI A2 use timed, close reading questions. They want to see if a nursing student can maintain strict attention to detail under intense pressure.
That's the logic, yeah. But then you have the working memory camp, championed by researchers like Patricia Wright in the UK.
What do they say?
She spent her career studying how everyday people fail to complete tax forms or appliance manuals. This camp argues that telling people to pay attention completely misses the biological reality of our brain's capacity.
So even if I read a manual incredibly slowly and carefully, I might still execute it wrong.
Yes, because human working memory can only juggle a handful of items at a time. If a vital conditional clause is buried in step 4 of a dense 7-step paragraph, even a slow reader will drop it as they try to hold the rest of the steps.
That makes sense. So what's their fix?
The fix, according to Wright's camp, is redesigning the text itself. You have to chunk the information. Break it into shorter sequences, use bullet points, put one action per line.
Just accommodate the limits of the mental scratch pad. I like that. But there's a third group, right? The design camp.
Yes, the design camp. They lean heavily on Don Norman's famous work on the psychology of everyday things. Their philosophy is more radical. They argue we should shift the cognitive burden completely off the reader.
How so?
Well, if people reliably misread your instructions, the reader isn't the problem. Your product design is the problem.
So don't blame the user, blame the engineer. And I know this camp points to a very specific, globally famous example of design supposedly solving the language problem, IKEA.
Yes, the wordless, picture-only assembly manual. Proponents argue that by completely removing written language, you remove the reading errors.
You know, I always thought those IKEA manuals were brilliant because they transcend language barriers, but you're telling me they're actually cognitive traps.
Counterintuitively, yeah. The research and, frankly, the massive volume of frustrated consumer complaints shows that wordless instructions generate incredibly high error rates of their own.
Oh, man. Anyone who has ever built an IKEA dresser and realized on page 13 that the unfinished edge of the board is facing outward knows exactly what you mean.
It's the worst feeling.
The picture didn't solve the problem. You just relocated the cognitive traffic jam from words to little cartoon arrows.
That is a brilliant way to frame it, a cognitive traffic jam. Pictures are just as capable of being misread or misordered as sentences are.
Because you still have to figure out what it wants you to do.
Exactly. You still have to look at the drawing, extract the sequential logic, identify the conditional states, like making sure the pre-drill holes align a certain way, and map that onto your physical actions.
So the great IKEA misconception is thinking that getting rid of words eliminates the cognitive load. But the brain still has to do the heavy lifting of translating a 2D image into a 3D sequential action.
It doesn't eliminate the load at all. It merely changes the format. One of the most surprising consensus findings across all these camps is that there is no format-free escape from the cognitive task of sequential execution.
No silver bullet.
None. Whether you are looking at paragraphs, bullet points, arrows, or diagrams, your brain still has to parse the structure, hold the sequence, fight off default assumptions, and verify the outcome.
That brings us full circle to why mastering this is such a critical, non-negotiable skill. We've covered a ton of fascinating ground today, so let's synthesize some key takeaways. If you are prepping for a nursing entrance exam, consider this your study guide. But honestly, these principles apply to everything we do.
Absolutely.
First and foremost, Comprehension is not execution. Being able to explain what a paragraph means does not guarantee you can carry out its instructions accurately.
Right. Turn off the literary analysis and turn on the literal execution.
Number 2, always read the entire instruction set before acting on a single step. You are hunting for those override clauses or exceptions that might pop up at the end, just like that classroom test trap.
And number 3 is crucial for veterans in any field. Remember that expertise increases the risk of skipping steps because it builds dangerous default assumptions. Think of Major Hill and the Boeing crash.
Great point. Number 4, written checklists actually work. And they work because they force you to verify your actions against the physical text, bypassing your volatile working memory.
And finally, number 5, watch out for conditional traps. Words like unless, except, only if, before, and after. Those words change the entire reality of the instruction, and they are exactly where test makers will try to trip you up.
When you really look at it, this isn't just an abstract hoop to jump through for an exam. Whether you're reading medication orders or discharge protocols, misreading a sequence has consequences that empathy simply cannot fix.
That's a powerful way to put it.
And outside of healthcare, this governs so much of modern life. It's the difference between filing your taxes correctly or triggering a massive audit. It's honoring the exact conditions of a legal contract before you sign it. It's even just baking bread. Like, if the recipe says if the dough is still sticky, add more flour, you have to recognize and execute that condition to get an edible loaf.
It really is a foundational skill for navigating an increasingly complex world. And I think there is a really powerful question you can take away from the science we've explored today.
What's that?
The next time you make a silly, frustrating mistake in your daily routine, maybe you assemble a piece of furniture backward, you ruin a recipe, or you find yourself standing up and shouting your name in a room full of strangers on instruction number 7. Stop and ask yourself, did you actually lack the knowledge to do it right? Or did you just try to execute the task from your degrading working memory instead of stopping to verify the written steps?